Hello and welcome to a look at Hypersports for the Commodore 64, a Konami arcade original that was released by Imagine. In Hypersports, you have multiple different sporting events that you have to go through, compete in, I think it's called, and they are not necessarily sporting events that are associated with most sports games. They are some of the outliers that most sports games seem to bypass. Let's talk a bit about the arcade original actually, because it is somewhat interesting. To my knowledge, there could be more of them, but Track and Field and Hypersports from Konami were quite unique in the way that they, not so much the fact that they were sports games, but more the controls of said sports games. Both arcades had three buttons, basically one for each leg if you want, and an action button. And you use those three buttons to do the sporting events. So if you are doing a running event, you would slam the left and right button alternatively, and use the middle button for jumps and that kind of stuff. How those arcade machines survive for any longer than 2-3 days, I am quite impressed by. The micro switches in the buttons must have been absolutely top-notch quality, because the machines I saw and I've played myself took some beating because people were just slamming, spamming, smacking those buttons like crazy. The different events of in this game even consist of swimming, as you probably noticed before, skeet shooting, long horse, archery, triple jump, and weightlifting. The arcade original contained one more event, which was pole vault, but for some reason that has been excluded from on this particular game. The different events has a set time, score, rating, whatever, that you need to obtain in order to qualify. And if you fail to obtain set score, time, whatever, you will game over. You don't have any extra lives in this game. You have one attempt. Well, you have multiple attempts within the individual events, but you have one fail. I'll put it that way. The game can be played on one or two players, and depending on the event, the players will either play alternatively or simultaneously. There's only really one event where both players are playing at the same time, which of course is swimming. Let's just do technical stuff and then we can talk about the gameplay. Graphically, compared to the arcade original, I actually think this game is surprisingly close. It's not necessarily arcade perfect or arcade accurate, but all things aside, I also think that the graphics side of things are looking pretty good. Animation is surprisingly smooth on the athletes running, but of course, because of the nature of me making these videos, I pay particular attention to things that I had happily ignored for years. And if you look at the runner, his upper body animation is perfectly fine. His arms are swinging back and forth, but his legs, his front leg never passes the middle, and his rear leg never passes the middle either. So basically, they are going back and forth from the middle and forward and middle and backwards. And once you have paid attention to it, you cannot unsee it. It's a minor thing, it doesn't matter, it's not relevant for the gameplay, but it's just an interesting observation. From the sound side of things, the title tune, which is an rendition of Richard Clayderman's Chariots of Fire, and therefore I have felt it necessary to mute it because I don't necessarily want YouTube to say, "Hi, someone owns this music." But the title tune is very, very easily recognizable, and the quality of it is very, very decent, and I fully enjoy it. Other music notes, or whatever you call them in game, is mainly jingles, and some of them I find okay and some of them I found a bit so-so, but nothing bad about them. The most enjoyable definitely is the new world record jingle that plays. I fully enjoy that, but for some odd reason, it doesn't play every single time you set a new world record. So you only get to enjoy it from time to time, but I do enjoy it all the same. Sound effects wise, as I've mentioned before, a lot of Commodore 64 sound designers didn't seem to do an awful lot out of sound effects and focus more on the musical side of things, but some effort has been made or put into making the sound effects distinctively decent and outright nice. And by and large, I think the sound effects in this game works very well and fits the game perfectly. The controls, running events, swinging events, that kind of events is usually waggle the joystick until it breaks, and then hit the fire button when you won't need to do whatever you need to do. In the swimming section, you need to breathe from time to time. I've heard that can be beneficial. And thankfully, in this particular game, unlike track and field, there's basically only two events where massive joystick wiggling is super important, which is swimming and the weightlifting. The controls are responsive. I'm perfectly happy with them. I'm not necessarily overly keen on wrecking a joystick every 3 days playing games like these, but sometimes you just have to deal with things like that. So we get to the gameplay part of things. As an action-oriented sports game, which is basically what this is, because of course it's distilled down to the most basic of the different sporting events. It works very well. The arcade worked extremely well. It was very popular and very popular for good reason. The swimming, you waggle for maybe about 10 yards or 10 meters, I think it's called. You need to take a breath. And in the skeet shooting event, you need to move right to shoot the right targets and left to shoot the left targets. And in that regard, I think it is a bit too sensitive. If you go out of rhythm, because it is a rhythm thing, even for a fraction of a second, regaining said rhythm is virtually impossible. I cannot remember whether that was the case for the arcade as well, but in the Commodore 64 version specifically, once you start losing or missing skeets in skeet shooting, getting back on track is virtually impossible. You basically have to do a full reset. When it comes to the long horse, you jump when you hit the springboard, and then you jump to leap off the horse itself, and then you waggle the joystick senselessly in order to do rotations, and then depending on your landing, you will be rated in a certain way. The thing is though, the jumping of the springboard and the vaulting of the horse are the two defining factors in your rating in that event. It doesn't matter whether you do 3 or 17 somersaults. If you start off from a not excellent point on the springboard and don't get even an excellent set off from the horse itself, you will be rated lower than if you do a perfect springboard and perfect horse vault and do 3 somersaults. So yeah, a bit wonky. Outside of that, weightlifting, as you probably noticed, with the heavy weight, it didn't move. I was hammering away and it just didn't respond, so it is a bit demanding, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but it can be quite challenging. Overall, I think this game is very enjoyable, but once you've beaten the events, it will loop, and then of course the qualifying requirements increases, as you can probably gather. And I think the qualifying increase is too steep for the second playthrough, but it is undeniably a very enjoyable game. And on that note, thanks for watching, take care, see you next time, bye bye.